The more I dived into this topic, the worse I felt. And now I think I understand why 53% of people that taking a student loan was the worst decision of their life.
How old was I when I signed my first promissory note? 17. Am I really going to read said promissory note from beginning to end?
You know, when you're 17 and you think of $20,000, if you didn't grow up in money, you don't even know what that means. Like, how big is that? I don't know. I can't even think about it.
Almost each family in the United States has a borrower. There are currently about 55 million people with a student loan debt.
We have over 40 million individual loans sitting out there, and 8 million of them are in default.
How bad? 62% of Ohio students graduate with more than $30,000 in student loan debt.
The average student loan debt is about $39,000, while the average medical school graduate owes about $242,000.
I initially had a full ride the first year, and then the second year came. I talked to financial aid and they were like, surprise! And so I ended up taking about $100K extra in student loans.
I originally had about $75,000 in loans from that 1 year of grad school. It's now up to almost $150,000.
But the worst thing is that the biggest part of the debt falls on the most vulnerable people, women and seniors.
Total is I have paid $120,000 and I still owe $76,000. How the
Despite the fact that 56% of college students are women, they hold roughly 2/3 of all students' debt in the nation. It's almost $929 billion. And seniors, poor seniors, more than 3 million people who have already retired are still paying their loans for education.
My debt is about $36,000. It took me over 30 years to get that amount.
30% of boomers and 32% of Gen X borrowers with student debt also have a 401k loan.
Hard to explain, but federal student loan debt has way exceeded national credit card debt by over $800 billion.
Here in the U.S., student loan debt surpasses the national credit card debt.
Worse than credit card debt.
And it looks like a national disaster. Now student loan borrowers in the United States owe collectively $1.7 trillion. Just to compare, with this money, all the country could have free medicine for half of the years, as the US spends over $3.5 trillion on healthcare per year. It's so hard to see how students innocently believe in their cloudless futures and rainbow perspectives after graduation.
Although I knew it was a huge financial commitment to take on, especially at such an early stage in my academic career.
And know that what really waits for them is a loan repayment till retirement, as more than 3 million senior citizens in the US are still paying off their student loans.
I still have 16 years to pay my loans because I have the 20-year repayment plan, which guarantees the lower payment.
If you don't get a degree, you cannot win. A terrible mindset in the country. Don't have a degree, you cannot get a good job, you cannot be successful, you cannot be happy. So it's no wonder that high school students are freaking out thinking they will not get a decent job if they don't have a degree.
I think the way our student loans are given is super predatory on people who are young and don't understand.
And they have been fed with the lie that the only way to afford their college degree is to take out a loan. Let's be honest. There are lots of different professions out there to make good money without getting a college degree.
I went to Tufts University. I studied drama and communications, and I owe $118,000 in student loans.
Of course, you probably want to have a doctor who has a master's degree in medicine, but what about specialists in design, marketing, accounting, programming, social science, or librarianship? For instance, online courses from Coursera can easily help to obtain the needed knowledge. If you still want to have a label of a popular university on your graduation certificate, you are welcome. Harvard, Stanford, and other universities offer numerous online courses with the official diplomas. Stories where young people graduate with a $200,000 in debt are not uncommon.
And I am officially in $200,000 in student loan debt.
I graduated from law school with over $200,000 of student debt. And a year ago today, I finished paying off all $225,526.77.
Even if you become an investment banker, it's still going to take you some time to pay $200,000 loan, and your standard of living will be lower in the meantime. If you can get into top 3 schools like Harvard, Yale, or Stanford, just go and worry about the money later.
Really do your research on the schools and the value of the degree or the credential that you're seeking out. What kind of money can you make?
You will be sad for life. If you got into one of top 30 schools, just try to keep your debt under $100,000. If you cannot, then don't go. Instead, go to a cheaper state school and keep your total debt under $30,000. Then work twice as hard to create opportunities. It's 100% possible to get a degree without a huge loans by picking a cheaper school. And if that means you choose a community college, who cares? Seriously, 10 years later, it will not even matter.
Ultimately, when it comes to going to your dream school and paying loans versus maybe going to another school you wouldn't be as happy at, you have to think of whether or not it's worth it.
Because the truth is, while student loans are meant to make life easier for students, they do exact opposite and create a bad money habits that students take with them through the whole life.
It just seems unfair that even though, as I said, education seems to be the great equalizer, right now I just feel, it feels so unequal for me.
Because once you have signed up for, let's say, $80,000 in student loans, what's the big deal for you when it comes to credit card debt, right? But it's $80,000 at the beginning. After 10 years of paying, the sum will be far, far more than this.
And I'm not saying that I regret the education that I received, because I don't. I think they were great years. But I feel like there has to be another way.
The negative effects of student loan debt aren't just financial either. The survey made by Ramsey Solutions say that 53% of those who took out student loans say they regret it.
Straight out of school, the economy was horrible, and I was struggling and realized it just wasn't even what I wanted to do. Ultimately, I realized that isn't what I wanted to do, but my expectation was I'm going to finish school and I'm going to get a job and I'm going to make money and I'm going to be able to pay my loans and live a good life, and that was not my experience at all.
43% of those who took out student loans regret going to college altogether. And that's a lot of regret, friends.
Get the statement and see how much I actually have to pay back. It's almost suffocating.
And living in regret isn't emotionally healthy for anyone. But that's not the only effect people deal with. Americans with the debts are nearly twice as likely to lose sleep over their personal finance than those without. On top of that, 54% of Americans worry daily about money.
Their financial situation is a main source of their depression and their anxiety.
I worry more about debt.
I would probably say just loans, I guess, yeah.
When it comes to money, I most often worry about my debt, mostly student loans.
And crazy enough, having piles of student loan debt makes millennials less likely to be able to afford things like houses and families. And nearly half of those who use student loans to pay for school are putting off their big life moments like buying a home, getting married or having kids just because of their student loan debt many years ago.
When I'm coming home from work and seeing everybody kind of pass by, the families with their kids, I think about me and when that will be a possibility. Also marriage, you know, when will I get married?
We see how student loan borrowers struggle to save for retirement, to have emergency savings, to buy houses, to start small businesses.
Not only does student loan debt weigh you down and stress you out, it impacts the future of our country. Believe it or not, student loans haven't been around forever.
1958 was the first time the US allowed students to borrow money for college.
They actually started in 1957, mostly to encourage more students to attend college, so Americans could beat out Russians during the space race.
Dateline, Russia, October 4th, 1950.
And it worked. College student attendance shot up from 3.6 million in 1960 to 7 million in 1970. And population of Americans during these years increased only for 17%, while number of students increased twice. Do you know what else shot up? Student loan debt. The most shocking numbers come up in the new millennium. Since the financial crisis of 2008, student loan debt has seen an almost 157% growth and is the fastest growing portion of total household debt in the US. The cost of getting your degree has tripled in the last 20 years, and it keeps on rising.
College tuition costs have risen 250% in the last 10 years.
Annual published tuition at public colleges rose 37% between 2008 and 2018.
Adjusted for inflation, the average college education in 2018 cost nearly 3 times what it did in 1978.
Despite the cost of university tuition skyrocketing and the educational books and supplies, the average hourly wage not even close to such an increase. You know what is crazy? People are sure that student loan debt is just a young person problem, but that's 100% false.
Believe it or not, America's seniors owe hundreds of billions of dollars in student loan debt.
Because some people are still paying on their student loans when their own kids are heading off to college. It's crazy. More than 15% of the total national student loan debt on the people of age 45 and older. Retirement is near and they are still paying for their education.
3 million seniors over 60 have student loan debt.
We need to admit that the student debt is holding the US economy back. Recent college graduates have entered the workforce during one of the most hostile labor markets in the history for young workers.
However, I lost my job at the zoo to the coronavirus pandemic.
In the end, I worked there for just 2 months.
2020 college graduates saw a bigger decrease in the labor force participation than those who graduated during the Great Recession. And young people are disproportionately impacted by the pandemic.
Working at interviewing at some of the top psychiatric facilities in the country, but due to COVID-19, everything came full stop.
But due to the COVID-19 pandemic, my spring internship was cut short.
They are more likely to report a job loss, a reduction in job responsibilities, or a pay cut. When you add that to a student debt, that creates quite a sizable hurdle. And the result is growing generational inequality.
The long-suffering generation of millennials are now set to be significantly poorer than baby boomers and Gen Xers.
That will have significant long-term consequences. It's about macro growth. The American government should care about student debt because it does affect the future of GDP growth when there is a lack of investment among young people. And one more fact. Do you know who control over 52% of US wealth based on statistics from the Federal Reserve? Baby boomers, while millennials control just 5%.
Where boomers at the same point in their lives accounted for 27%.
Just to compare, in 1989, when baby boomers were around the same age as millennials are today, they controlled 21% of the country's wealth, 4 times more. Student debts are also impacts borrowers by raising debt burdens, lowering credit scores.
My credit score dropped 36 points.
Your credit score can actually drop when you pay off your student loan debt.
And ultimately limiting the purchasing power of those with a student debt. Because young people are disproportionately burdened by student debt, they will be less able to participate and help to grow the economy in a long run. Because what the economy wants is a widespread opportunity for investment over time. That's what's good for the economy, that's what's good for the Wall Street. And if you don't have that, then you are looking at a slower growth from the prime age working population. The Federal Reserve estimates that the student debt shaves roughly 0.5% of GDP per year.
We've been keeping up with the ongoing shocks to the American economy.
While the current impact may appear relatively small as borrowers struggle to buy homes, save for retirement and invest in the stock market, the impact may become more and more significant. All those assets that the boomers have been accumulated to feed the economy, who is going to buy those assets?
Has meant that today's millennials only account for around 3% of national wealth.
Who is going to take over to make sure that the stock and asset markets keep going up? Maybe boomers can leave those through their inheritance to their children, but that just concentrates wealth, which gets back to the issue of inequality.
The largest generational transfer of wealth is coming as baby boomers move out of the workforce and millennials move in.
And finally, there is a concern that many borrowers are expected to default on their student loans. If you have delinquencies that lowers credit scores, that's problematic in terms of doing anything in the economy, from getting a credit card to getting a mortgage. Because of student loan difficulties, borrowers will be held back from generating wealth through means such as buying a home, starting a business, or anything else. The student loan crisis is both severe and large enough to require urgent action.
And that young people are getting crushed by the burden of student debt.
For instance, President Joe Biden said he supports raising at least $10,000 for all borrowers, a move he could potentially make through executive order.
The legislation passed by the Democratic House calls for immediate $10,000 forgiveness of student loan.
Alternatively, if the White House leaves student loan forgiveness to Congress, Democrats could use the budget reconciliation process to get it done. Either way, if all federal student loan borrowers get $10,000 of their debt forgiven, it erases the debt of about a third of all student loan borrowers.
President Joe Biden has said he's in favor of canceling up to $10,000 in student debt for borrowers.
And the outstanding education debt in the country would fall to around $1.3 trillion from $1.7 trillion.
We had about $1.3 trillion of. Today we have 1.35 trillion with 36 million borrowers.
Secretary of Education Miguel Cardona said, "We recognize that the student debt is holding people back, and unfortunately there are many who are in major debt that weren't even able to finish their degree, who don't have the means to remove their debt. So we are focused, and it's a priority for me and for President Biden to make sure that the part of the conversation is examining loan forgiveness. Those conversations are still continuing.
Our students across the country need more support.
So the Biden administration is open to exploring options to help student loan borrowers, including mass student loan cancellation.
Because that's what student debt cancellation is. It's an investment in the people.
But debt relief alone is not enough. Debt cancellation doesn't make college more affordable, and it doesn't increase the number of students going to college or graduating from college. If you don't do something that prevents this problem from happening, in the future we are going to be here again in 5 or 10 years. The true problem is that tuition is very expensive. But what are students really paying for? Besides lectures and seminars, it includes compulsory field trips, access to the library, access to computer facilities, support and well-being services, students' union membership, course administration, and even graduation ceremony. Additionally, students pay for a room, books, transport, and other stuff. All these small things make up nearly 30% of all expenses. Just think about this.
I've spent over $129,000 on my tuition, not including the textbooks.
So the main question appears, is such an education really worth its money? It's not a new concept, as a student loan is not a new problem. Back in 1955, Milton Friedman introduced the concept of using an RSA to pay for college. He claimed that debt is an inappropriate way to finance education. Instead, he suggested using a method similar to investing in stock market, by which the amount of lender's payment is determined by the student's success, just as a shareholder benefits when a corporation grows. Maybe it's better to avoid taking student loans at all and choose an alternative way of paying for your education. For instance, income share agreement could be a solution.
An income share agreement is really cool. It is a contract between a student and Lambda School that instead of paying an upfront tuition or instead of taking out a loan, a student simply agrees to pay Lambda School a percentage of their salary for a set amount of time, so long as that salary lies within certain thresholds.
It's a legal contract through which a student receives upfront money for college in exchange for a fixed percentage of their future income. Income share agreements are not widely available, but some can be made through universities, career schools, and private lenders.
It's not a loan. There's no interest, no down payment, and best of all, no debt. Instead, you agree to share a percentage of your income for a limited time.
So maybe going through the program without worrying about paying for it until you have an income post-graduation could be a good solution, and most income share agreements allow you to do this. Also, ISA helps students to focus on school and getting the education they needed without having to make payments while studying or needing to have a large amount of money saved up before beginning their first semester. With an ISA, you'll only start making payments after you graduate and once you get a job, and you usually don't owe anything until you earn a certain amount of money.
You instead pay for it with a promise that after you graduate from the course, you'll pay back the tuition with a percentage of that income.
And this means that you will only pay if your education leads to success in the job market. And unlike with a traditional private student loan, you will not have a fixed payment hanging over your head with an income share. Just imagine what a wonderful feeling not to worry about paying huge debt every month and no matter how much money you make.
If you are earning the base income, which is $40,000, your monthly payments are going to be $333.
ISAs also have a maximum payment cap which limits your total financial commitment. The max payment cap is the absolute maximum payment you could pay towards your ISA obligation. Your total payments will never exceed this cap, and if you do reach the cap on your payments, your ISA obligations are done.
Your contract is finished once you've completed the monthly payments or reached the payment cap, whichever comes first.
But what if you don't want to pay at all? Is there any options? Yes. It's a delighting that there are numerous disruptive, innovative online platforms that are fighting with the overvalued universities' degrees. For instance, Coursera, edX, Khan Academy, Lynda.com, and other platforms can help you.
All these different subjects for free without spending any money going into debt. And if all of this information is free from the top universities in the world, then why would you ever spend money on it?
Coursera, it's one of the best ways to gain new skills and knowledge from some of the top universities in the world at an affordable price as low as free.
One more popular online education technology is a check. It provides digital and physical textbook rentals that can save up to 90% of new titles. So knowledge today is very available. It needs you to be more disciplined, but I think it's a less hard task than paying your student loan debt till your retirement.